September 11th, 2001, a day that will live forever in our memories, a day that changed the world and changed me. That Tuesday morning opened my eyes to what some people outside of America think about us, and prepared my way of thinking for the rest of my life. This is my experience from that day. The events of 9/11 happened 13 years ago this week. I was a freshman in high school, having started classes only a couple of weeks earlier. But I can still remember where I was when I got the news. I was in algebra class when Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. No one in my class knew anything about it. When the period was over, I entered the hallway and a girl was screaming and running, her arms in the air as she passed me, and she was shouting, "The World Trade Center's been hit!" I didn't even know what the World Trade Center was. I knew that the two tallest buildings in New York City were called the Twin Towers. I didn't know they were one and the same. The girl's proclamation meant nothing to me, yet. I walked around a few corners in the hallway filled with teenage strangers until I reached my next class, which happened to be Global Issues. Now, every classroom in my high school had a TV in it. It was used for our weekly student news program and for the teachers to play tapes during class lessons. When the news spread of what happened in New York, many teachers decided to put the news on. The moment I walked into class, I turned up to look at the TV mounted on the wall, and to my horror, I saw a thick, dark plume of smoke and ash rise up from the top of one of the Twin Towers. And almost immediately after realizing what building I saw on fire, I watched the second plane, Flight 175, strike lower than the first hijacked plane on the South Tower, exploding into a massive fireball and instantly vaporizing everyone on board, and many more who were still in the building. I could not believe what I had just seen. The news coverage continued, and as students trickled through the door, our teacher, Mr. Proctor Floyd, instructed them to have a seat as we all watched for a few minutes. When I was younger, my family traveled to New York City and we visited some relatives. My mother had promised me that one day she would take me up to the very top of the Twin Towers so I could stand on the tallest buildings in the country. I thought that would probably be the highlight of my adolescence. But as I sat and watched the terrifying images in my high school classroom, I wondered if this promise would ever be fulfilled. After watching the impacts replay and hearing reporters and anchors try to explain what was happening, Mr. Proctor Floyd started talking to the class about the incident that had just happened. I honestly don't remember a word that was said. I was so mortified to see the death of hundreds of people right before my eyes. I wondered if it could be over. After seeing two airplanes fly into two buildings in New York City, I knew this couldn't have been a mistake. I didn't know about radical Islam, or who terrorists were. The life I lived up through September 10th was peaceful. It was my childhood. My fear was this could have only been the beginning of some full-on assault on our country. I don't remember when I heard it, but just over a half hour later, Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon. I thought without a doubt, we are being attacked with our own airplanes, and it's only just begun. Then we saw it happen. The TV on in the corner of the room at 9:59 a.m. showed the collapse of the South Tower. The second building struck, fell to the ground like a scene from a movie. A massive dust cloud and debris cloud plowed through the streets and around the surrounding buildings, blanketing the streets with ash and with chaos. This was the most frightening thing I had ever seen. 4 minutes later at 10:03, a group of brave Americans on board Flight 93, flying above rural Pennsylvania, successfully fought their way into the cockpit of their hijacked plane, causing it to nosedive and crash, sacrificing their lives to prevent the murder of hundreds, potentially more. When I heard of the fourth plane's crash, I nearly started to panic. How many more could there be? I moved on to my next class, English Literature. I was so stunned by the events of that morning, I had no interest in learning or paying attention in class. The rest of the school day was a blur. I don't remember lunch or any other class I had that day. I walked home and went straight to the TV. to watch further developments. I watched the footage of the North Tower's collapse and relived the horror I felt from that morning. I learned that people leapt to their death from the tower rather than die in the fire or the eventual collapse. I watched the heroic firemen and others risk their lives to help everyone around them and get them to safety. I was glued to the TV set. I didn't want to turn away. We watched the president address the nation in a moment of true unification when Congress started singing "God Bless America." I was 13 when 9/11 happened, and 13 years have passed since then. Half of my life happened before that day, and half of my life has happened since. In 2000, my 8th grade class went on a trip to New York City. We visited Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty. Just after getting off the ferry to Ellis Island, I saw the New York City skyline. I had a little disposable Kodak camera, and I took this picture. This was my favorite picture I've ever taken. And I took it in October of 2000, 11 months before these buildings would be destroyed. I never thought I could hold such a small piece of history in my hands. And thanks to the internet, I can find out exactly where I took this picture, right here. In early 2002, several months after 9/11, my 9th grade trip to New York was postponed, understandably. Eventually, the trip was approved, but we weren't allowed on Liberty Island, and of course we couldn't go to Ground Zero, but we drove by and I managed to take a few photos from what we could see on the bus. The wall where people memorialized those who had been lost only a few months earlier. The scars of the nearby buildings, and the giant holes in the ground where the two towers once stood. My childhood was essentially peaceful, with only the regular events of life occurring. I thought everything was fine and there was nothing to fear. But 9/11 jump-started my realization that there is more happening in this world than just my own life. The world has changed so much in 13 years. Things we can no longer do or even say. People become offended at the simplest things, and the truth is open to one's own interpretation. Today, America is in turmoil economically, domestically, spiritually, and globally. One good thing that came from 9/11 was our country's resolve and unity, pride in what this country stood for, and fearlessness to defend ourselves from any exterior threat, and a renewed reliance on God. The second half of my life started off in fear, but the nation became of one mind, with a single purpose: to become greater and to defend freedom from the likes of evil men. But our desire to punish that evil has waned, and we dispute petty and insignificant differences amongst us. In recent days, we've even seen the resurgence of that evil. But we, the people, wait to see what will be done about it. Our purpose as a nation is to give mankind a chance at freedom from oppressive worldviews and to bring liberty to those who suffer. Sadly, not everyone agrees that's what we should even be doing anymore. Our country is greatly divided. What has all of this taught me? I learned to believe in America, in liberty and freedom, and to defend our land and our people and our way of life. To trust in God for His blessings and deliverance in our day-to-day walk with Him. We need something to unite under, a call to defend our ideals and defeat those who seek this nation's ruin. The world may never again be the way it was before 9/11, but my hope is that my children can live in a time of peace like before that terrible day. But I believe that it will only come to America when this country is united once again. May we never forget what happened on that day. I'm Israel Alejandro, and that's the way I see things.